The whole Jaramillo family almost died on June 3rd, 2021, while having a good time at the Adventureland Resort in Altoona, Iowa. The family survived that sad, miserable and horrific day, but one of the children, Michael, died after enduring a rather terrifying incident involving a raft at the Raging River attraction. 11-year-old Michael Jaramillo, his parents David and Sabrina, his brothers David Jr. and Gus, and cousin Nyla Pettie were at the park to celebrate the younger David's birthday. It was supposed to be a fun and thrill-packed day of adventure at the majestic Adventureland Resort. The Raging River was just too attractive, since it involved the whole family getting on one raft together. So they took it. But moments later, after getting released onto the thrilling simulated river rapids ride, everything turned into a hellish nightmare. Their ordeal that day was something straight out of an action movie. Little did they know that the ride, which had just reopened that day after being closed for more than a year, received patchwork repairs that involved duct tape. Stay tuned for all the details of the tragic death of Michael Jaramillo by the Adventureland Raging River Ride. Watch till the end to see how shocking the negligence by the park was. Adventureland Resort is a massive theme park in Altoona, Iowa, just northeast of Des Moines. It features over 100 rides, shows, and attractions. The park contains many design nods inspired by Disneyland and Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom. The Raging River Raft Ride, which killed Michael, was closed in early 2020 due to COVID and for the installation of new electronics. To the Jaramillo family's bad luck, it began operating again the same day they were visiting the park. Raging River is a river rapids ride, a water-based attraction designed to mimic whitewater rafting. On Saturday, July 3rd, 2021, the Jaramillo family was having a great time. After all, it was their son David Jr.'s birthday. The massive park was just immensely exciting. Their decision to visit was a last-minute call. Originally, they didn't have a plan. At 7 p.m., Michael Jaramillo, his parents, David and Sabrina, his brothers, David and Gus, and cousin Nyla Pettie, a total of 6 people, got on the raft and strapped their safety belts, which are designed to keep riders from getting ejected during the ride. As soon as a 1,700-pound fiberglass raft, which keeps afloat with a series of air bladders, was launched, it violently began bumping against the concrete bottom of the watercourse. It was not exactly something that one wouldn't suspect is normal. After all, it is called the Raging River for a reason, and raft rides are known to be fast and rough. However, the raft was banging the ground way too hard, causing the family to rattle, and it also began filling with water, which is not supposed to happen. Something was terribly wrong with the raft, and a disaster was on the way. Unfortunately, such rides cannot be stopped by riders, nor there is anything they can do if it capsizes. The raft was not just banging the ground and taking on water, it was also hitting the course walls quite hard. The Jaramillos simply became trapped on fast-moving water in an incline inside a broken raft. Seconds later, the worst thing possible happened. The raft capsized. Getting out of such a situation is extremely hard because the raft was still moving, banging about the riders who turned upside down and submerged underwater. They were also strapped in their places with safety belts, which have now become their death belts. To their bad luck, the raft capsized as it rounded a corner that took it out of sight of the ride operators, which meant the operators weren't aware that something horrific just took place. The Jaramillos' bodies were getting scraped on the floor and banged against the walls. Soon the raft jammed against one of the walls of the watercourse, partially breaking Michael's father's shoulder. A desperate father can move mountains when his family is in danger, so despite his injuries and being submerged, he pushed hard to get the capsized raft moving again, further injuring his shoulder. The mother, Sabrina, was also putting on one hell of a fight, trying to rescue her family. so as soon as the raft stopped moving, she managed to pull herself out of her seatbelt. At first, she thought she was the last one out of the raft, and that her family was already ejected earlier and thus safe. Of course, she hoped for such a thing. She just wanted them to be safe. However, she was wrong. They all were still trapped under the raft and slowly drowning and dying from the wounds they sustained from the scraping and hitting the walls. A second later, she realized that her severely injured husband was screaming and wondered why he was screaming. Then words came out of his desperate soul. They are still under. He then dived below to lift the raft up, and she joined him in trying to lift it. But they couldn't do it. They simply couldn't flip it back to its normal position because it weighs a whopping 1,700 pounds, and David had sustained serious wounds to his shoulder and back. Magically and somehow, none of the staff at the park heard or saw anything. However, a woman who was visiting the park saw the struggle and immediately dialed 911. Additionally, a contractor who was working nearby installing a fireworks display noticed the struggling family and rushed to their aid. The contractor managed to cut the boys loose, and he and David began administering CPR. One would think that the staff park noticed something by now and even bothered to call 911. After all, the park should have an emergency plan in place for such scenarios. However, the opposite was true on that tragic day. When the firefighters arrived, they found a locked gate and were greeted by Adventureland employees who were even unaware of the accident. They had to struggle with a heavy chain securing the access gate. It later turned out that the park never called 911 in the first place. If it was not for the woman who was visiting the park and the contractor, the tragedy could have been much worse. As if all this was not baffling and maddening enough, the park actually pays a few police officers and firefighters to be present at the park during work hours. These emergency responders, who were already present in the park, did not learn that a serious incident had taken place until the 911 dispatcher contacted them. Even the emergency route for evacuating people from the ride was obstructed, and the emergency responders had to maneuver on uneven grounds to get Michael and his brother, who sustained serious injuries, to the ambulances. Michael was pronounced dead at a Des Moines hospital the next day on July 4th, while his brother David Jr. remained in the hospital for a month in a medically induced coma. As for their father, he required repeated surgeries for the injuries to his shoulder and back. As for the mother Sabrina, Gus, and cousin Nyla, they sustained only minor injuries. An investigation by the local Des Moines Register news agency found that similar water rides have a long history of incidents and fatalities. They also found that the conditions at Adventureland on the day of the accident that killed Michael were consistent with dangers identified in a service bulletin from a competing ride maker and in a pair of government reviews conducted after fatal accidents. The park was sold in 2022 by the Krantz family to international amusement park operator Palace Entertainment. During the state's investigation of the Jaramillo's tragedy, a former rides manager at Adventureland told investigators the park kept rides operating with duct tape and bubblegum. The employees said, "It's such a beautiful park, and I just hope that maybe by me saying something that the accident that tragically happened will never happen again." Michael Jaramillo's parents launched a lawsuit, which seeks unspecified damages, alleging that Adventureland failed to ensure that ride maintenance and repairs were not hastily and cheaply conducted in a substandard manner not recommended by a manufacturer, resulting in exposure to injury and damage by Adventureland patrons. Investigators also found that the employees posted at the Raging River Ride on the day of the incident had never worked on that ride prior to that day and had never been trained on that ride before. What is even more disturbing about the park's negligence is the fact that they were using parts that hadn't been approved by the manufacturer to replace the wires that guide rafts and failing to do associated engineering work. They even used Flex Seal, a product marketed primarily through TV infomercials rather than approved patches to fix leaks in rafts' flotation bladders. A state report said the Jaramillo raft, after the accident, had a deflated bladder that had been repaired early in the day. However, the park didn't even test the raft after the patchwork repairs. The Raging River Ride remains closed under the new Adventureland owners, who have said they are still determining whether to refurbish it or remove it and make way for a new attraction. Michael Fathers' final words on the matter were, "It was our first time going, and we just happened to be picked out of everyone who was there. People need to know how dangerous these parks are." Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell button to get notified every time we upload a new video that will take you to the heart of the scenes and mysteries of some of the most terrifying incidents, accidents, disasters, and paranormal events from around the world.